Compliant is beaver.
See, that makes absolutely no sense to me because compliant, a dove makes sense, right? Because it's a peacemaker. It doesn't want to hurt anybody. It's happiest when everybody gets along. Beavers have literally killed people. There was a man in Tennessee who was literally killed by a beaver. If you don't believe me, look it up. Okay, the guy was fishing and he saw this great big beaver and he wanted to get a picture of it. It bit him in the leg, severed an artery, and he bled to death. Okay, that is not a compliant animal. That's not an animal you want to jack around with. I have no idea who came up with it. There are 100 animals that are more compliant than a beaver is.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the Called2B Podcast, where we seek to empower everyday believers to discover and live out their authentic calling in Christ. I'm Reverend Dr. Travis Guzzi. I am the Executive Director of Wellness and Coaching for the Southeastern District in the LCMS, as well as an ICS Certified Life and Executive Coach and a Gallup Strengths Coach. And it is wonderful having all of you here for Season 3 of the Called2B Podcast. And in studio, we have Trish Freshwater, and joining us online is our third co-host, Kevin Scott, coming in from Maryland. Great having you both back for our third season.
It's amazing to be with you both. It's amazing to see both of you and all of you out there in Called2B land. And I'm glad that we could actually make this work. Hello from Maryland.
Yes, awesome. And Trish, good to have you back.
Yes, it feels like it's been so long since we've done a recording, but I'm excited that we're ready to jumpstart and get things moving again.
Well, we took a little bit of a sabbatical, time off this summer to refresh and recharge in our callings. And by the way, just real quick, I'd love to check in with both of you. Trish, you have some exciting news of some accomplishment that you've done.
Oh, yes. So I did finish my master's program in industrial organizational psychology, which is a mouthful, but really it's just the psychology of work and how people work together, leadership, things like that. So
Awesome.
It's exciting to be done and put that behind me. So my evenings are now my own again. My children
Very
are
nice.
no longer complaining that the computer is my life, but it's good to be done and start looking at what's next.
Yeah, well, hey, congratulations. That's a big accomplishment. And we're also looking forward to hearing from some of your learning and insight as it applies to our callings in life. And Pastor Kevin, the Rev Kev, how are things up in Maryland? You're starting a new ministry up there.
Yeah. They're good. Every day is a new adventure. So first, let me start in the Scott household. We've got a brand new baby. She's about 2 months old, little Maven. She is incredible and doing really, really well. But we're full on into baby mode again. And I don't know if I've just blacked out the other two kids, but babies were exhausting. They're
happens.
Absolutely exhausting. I mean, it's a good thing that they're cute. Otherwise, they're exhausting.
Yes.
So that keeps me. I mean, Trish, forget about having your evenings free. This little girl has got just all the control. Okay, I have none of it. Ministry, it's amazing. St. Paul's, we are rocking and rolling. We are celebrating all year long that Jesus makes the difference and that he empowers us to go out and make a difference in the lives of our neighbors and our communities and our families. Our school, 340 plus kids. My oldest started kindergarten this year. Mind blown. And that's, and I'm, what is the, TikToking. I'm doing that too. Segue, Pastor Dad on TikTok. You can find me there and find me just rambling on about all kinds of parent ministry. God, just whatever pops into my brain at the time. That's what I talk about.
Yeah, I've caught a few of those. They're pretty informative and entertaining.
In other words, I've got lots of free time. Okay, all the free time in the world.
Now, is that sleep deprivation free time or dedicated free time?
I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I just write sermons in my sleep. I dream them up, and then I just go into the pulpit on Sunday and preach them. It's a gift. I don't know.
Well, hey, God bless you. I think that would terrify me doing that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Very good. Well, hey, great to have all of you back. And we are starting a new series for the start of Season 3. We're going to be talking about, in the next 4 podcasts, how to unlock your kingdom potential. And it's really about how do you take your divine GPS, your gifts, passions, and strengths of God's workmanship and design, and live that out in your calling in life to harness it. And Trish, why don't you set us up for what we're going to be doing kicking off this new podcast series?
Sure. So as Travis mentioned, we're going to be doing a series called Unlocking Your Kingdom Potential. And we're going to really focus on personality, the things that make us who we are, that innate thing that doesn't really shift a lot over time. It may wobble here and there, but it's in general going to be pretty solid throughout most of your life. And how can we apply that to your gifts and your talents and things that you bring to the world?
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, hey, let's get started by this. We're starting this series, Unlocking Your Kingdom Potential. Let me start by asking each of you, how do you recognize potential in people, and what is potential?
So one of the things that really excites me in ministry is finding people who are underutilized, ignored, maybe underestimated. Those are my favorite people. And they are always there. You always find them. And it's that person that's kind of flying under the radar. Sometimes they're younger people, sometimes they're older. But it just seems to kind of be something that I can do. And I think it comes from maybe a management background, but in conversation, that's really where you start to see, as you hear people talk about what they're passionate about or what their background is, or just by getting to know them, then you can see, oh, okay. I'll tell you about one guy in particular. There's a guy named Bob who goes to our church. He's the best prayer I've ever heard. He says amazing prayers. He's close to 80 years old. And the first time I was ever on a meeting with this guy, I was like, I'm thinking to myself, like, if I was on my deathbed, I would want this guy to pray for me. And so he's kind of become my official prayer. Like, if there's somebody who really needs like a long prayer call, and he loves doing it too. And so it's just that kind of one interaction led me to see, oh, Bob has this gift for prayer. So now we can put this to use in blessing other people who really need prayer. That's just one example, but I think it just happens in those conversations, maybe with people who just haven't been engaged in that way before.
Yeah, as you were talking, I suddenly had the image of Aladdin, the diamond in the rough.
Yes.
There's potential there. It looks rough. It hasn't been polished or designed yet, but there's value there.
Yeah, and much like Kevin was talking about passions, I also I think some things that came to mind is the Clifton strengths that we've talked about before. One of my strengths is individualization, and my understanding on that is that I tend to see people for what they are capable of, and in its most simplest forms. And it's far not like this in my brain, I promise. But in its simplest form, I see a lot of cookie cutter types of people. When I see people, I see, oh, they fit in this category, or they fit in this category, and I very quickly am able to see how they fit with everyone else, and what their skills are and what they'd be really good at. And so, like with my comfort dog team, I know everyone on the team and what their strengths are and how they fit together. So when I look at the team, I know who to lean on. So I know who has the potential to maybe step up in my absence or to step up in someone else's absence. I know who's got that skill set. And the skills we've talked about a lot in here, and those talents, and I look for people who have those opportunities to really grow them and then become that leader.
So it's not just the individual, but how might they fit with others on teams, what they could accomplish, and that's really, I think, what this idea of kingdom potential is God has poured in us our unique gifts, the gifts of our personality, which we're going to start talking about today, our passions, our God-given talents, strengths in life. And it's helping to recognize these aren't just for living a life for ourselves, but it's to make a larger kingdom impact, as well as not just individually, but working together with others. And when I think about potential, what image comes to my mind is the Apostle Paul, or his name was Saul. And, Jesus grabbed his life, opened his eyes to see his promises and love. But the church was pretty wary about him until a guy named Barnabas, which meaning the son of encouragement, saw the kingdom potential, saying, "Hey, this guy who was like this Pharisee of Pharisees, now grabbed by Jesus and what he could do for the kingdom of God, saw him out, invested in his life." and helped the rest of the church gain trust that not only had he been redeemed, but there's value for what he could offer and what God wanted to do in and through him.
Yeah, Travis, I love that because I've often said it before about Paul that I don't think much changed in terms of his personality when he got hit over the head by Jesus. I think he was just pointed in the right direction because if you look at the way that he writes, he's still you can tell just how zealous he is. I mean, this guy's not going to do anything half-baked. Like if this guy's gonna persecute the church, he's gonna burn it to the ground. If this guy is going to preach Jesus, he's gonna write half the New Testament, and well, he did.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. So it's just taking that zeal and redirecting it and repurposing it for a kingdom purposes in mind. Yeah. So we're going to start this off by taking a look at the gift of our personality. Now, actually, personality is made up of two parts. The first part of personality is what I would call your temperament. That's kind of like what's hardwired in you. If you think of a computer, it's like the wires, the microchips, the circuitry that's within it. That's not going to change. That's part of its creation. The second part of personality is actually character. Characters, I kind of think of it as your software. It's the programs, what's programmable on a computer, word processing, video, like we've got the Rev Kev here on Skype we're utilizing to bring him into this conversation. That's all that can be installed and developed and even modified over time. And so personality is really this combination of temperament, what God has hardwired, and character, what can be shaped and developed. And we're going to get into that in our next podcast, but I want to focus more on the temperament part of personality, what God has hardwired as far as who you are. And so there's a couple different ways that I take a look at this. One way is, you could just kind of go through life and get feedback and maybe stumble into it, but there's also some fantastic assessments that are out there. And what are some personality assessments that you both are familiar with?
Oh my gosh. Well, we just did up here in Maryland, we just did the Enneagram as a staff, which was very, very eye-opening and very helpful. There's the Myers-Briggs, the DISC we're going to talk about today. And is there one called the MIPS, or did I make that up?
I'm not familiar with that one.
I don't know about that one, but
there were two.
Might be a new assessment coming from the Rev Kev.
Yeah, no. When I was in seminary, there was one that they had us do, and I swear it was called the MIPS. But it's creepy. Like, it's actually creepy. You take this questionnaire where you don't think these questions are about anything, then it spits out 2 pages where it tells you basically your life story and exactly who you are.
Oh, wow.
And it's so dead on accurate that it's like, oh my gosh. And it gets like really specific too. So I'll have to look that. I swear it's called the MIPS though, which stands for something, and I don't know what that is.
Right. Any that you're familiar with, Trish?
Really, Myers-Briggs is the big one.
Yeah.
We have our whole INFJ.
What are you, Trish?
INFJ.
You're an INFJ. Kevin, do you happen to know your 4 letters?
ENFP, I think.
Okay. I'm a ENFJ.
Okay.
Now, there's a lot of translating that has to go into it because you get the 4 letters and the combinations of what it means. It's a great assessment tool, and actually I'm trained in Myers-Briggs. But I want to introduce a tool to help understand your personality and your temperament. I think it's a little simpler, or at least a good intro. And that's the DISC assessment, because you don't get 4 letters. You get 1 letter, or maybe 1 letter and an adjacent letter. We'll get into what that means, but I think it's a great way, and really a simplified way, just to kind of enter into this idea of what it's for. Now, at the end of the day, a person or an assessment tool, I think we've got to just kind of say this. It's not something to define you or put you into a box. It is simply to help create some self-awareness inside of you. And it's also designed to help you have conversations with others so that you not only know who you are, but get to know others better, how they operate in life, and then to create some action, things that you can now start putting into action in your various callings of life. So we want to be careful with that.
Yeah, it's a guide. It is something that helps you look at other people and say, oh, well, that makes sense. Now I understand why they do things this way.
That's right.
Or why they do it that way. But it's not the end all be all, because we all vary from those assessments every day in our lives. We're never going to live a true life that is, I may be INFJ, but gosh, there may be times where that E comes into play, or there may be times when another variable comes in. And so for those who don't know, we'll just look at the first letter because this could be a long conversation, but I is introvert and E is extrovert. And most people see me as more extroverted, but really I like my alone time. I have a lot of deep thinking that happens. So I am truly introverted, but I can sit on that fence if I need to.
Yep.
And so that's where, it's a guide. It's not prescriptive.
Yeah. And it's also not an excuse.
No.
Well, I do that because I'm an ENFJ.
No.
And, it's like, and suddenly bad behavior
That's a
gets
trap.
excused. Yeah. So, well, hey, let's dive into the DISC assessment. Like I said, it's a really simple one. For those who are watching our video version, Kendall's going to be my son, who's our producer. He's going to put an image on the screen, and it's really kind of this intersection of two dichotomies. It's looking, first of all, are you outgoing or extroverted, which we just talked about in the Myers-Briggs, and this is one aspect that it's very similar to. Or are you more reserved or introverted? Now, I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize is extroversion, introversion is not about people. It's about how do you recharge? Do you recharge outwardly by being around people and engaging in activities? Or as you talked about, Trish, is it going inside, getting that quiet and alone time and an internal processor versus an external processor?
Or the brain that never shuts off because it's always analyzing and always thinking.
And then the other is task-oriented, or are you people-oriented? So are you, about the tasks and getting things done, or is it more about being around people? And so those are kind of the two dichotomies that we have. And then within it really are kind of four different personality types that come. The first is dominant. These are individuals who are outgoing, extroverted, but they're task-oriented. And so some things about them is they're very literal, logical, prepared. Those who are influencing are outgoing, extroverted, but they're also people-oriented. These are people, besides that, are also about, they're intuitive, emotional, impromptu. By the way, the interesting thing about dominant, that's about 19% of our population. Influencing or influencers are 32% of the population. The third one is S for steady. This is about 35% of the population. They are introverted, but people-oriented. They're intuitive, emotional, impromptu. And then the last one is C for compliant. They're introverted, but task-oriented, about 14% of our population, literal, logical, very prepared. So basically, when you take the assessment, you get one of four letters. You're either a D, an I, an S, or a C for dominant, influencing, steady, compliant. And then you might get one of the adjacent areas kind of as a minor in there. So you might be an I with an S or an I with a D. Let's just start off. By the way, have either of you taken the DISC assessment? Kevin has. Kevin, do you remember what you were on this?
So for me, it was funny. So it was one of the first things that I did in seminary. They actually put us through it in orientation, but we knew it as the bird test. And the reason we knew it as the bird test is because, dominant was an eagle, influencing was a parrot, steady was an owl, and compliant was a dove. Okay, so for me, and they actually let us see where we ranked in all of them. So we got to see like the total breakdown, which was cool. So for me, I was an owl, which is an S, but my compliant was within 1 point of that. Like it was they were very, very,
so that
very
was your
close.
Adjacent.
Yeah, and then my influencing was actually pretty close too. So it kind of looked like this, and then you got to dominant, and it like kind of tanked. It went down really, really low, which was good because I don't know how true this is, but in seminary, I remember them telling us, if you're a high D, we're going to have to work with you a lot. And like we had a few of those guys, and they had to do like extra counseling sessions. One guy in particular he was actually a good friend of mine, and he had done active duty. He had been like an active duty Marine. And he explained it as like, I don't have time to worry about how people are feeling about what's going on. Like, I need to get things
very
done.
task oriented.
I don't care what you think about it. I'm right, you're wrong. And and he really did. He came a long way, but he was willing to, like, he owned it. He knew why. He's like, this is how we are in the Marines. This is how they train us. And so, but yeah, I was an owl and dove and then a parrot and then an eagle last. Yeah. So that was me.
But by the way, there actually are a lot of DISC assessments out there. So this is actually something that's in public domain. So depending on the company, so the DISC assessment I utilize is the Trishs Disc, and they actually have different animals. So the animals, So the animals, they're more metaphors. If it helps you connect, we're not going to say spirit animals because that's not quite the right thing, but your personality animal. So in this one, in the Trishs Disc, dominant is lion.
I can see that one. Okay.
Influencing is otter.
Okay.
They're kind of playful.
I'm a little down with that. Okay.
The steady is golden retriever. And Trish, you could resonate with that with the comfort dogs.
Okay.
I can, but it makes me a little nervous because, sometimes you might think of a golden retriever as just kind of being like aloof and just there. But I don't think that fits.
Yeah, but where you've got introverted and people oriented, I don't know. That's Solomon in a lot of ways. He's pretty chill.
I can see that.
Yeah. And then the last one, and I know, Kevin, we were talking beforehand. You might have a little on this one. Compliant is beaver.
See, that makes absolutely no sense to me because compliant. So a dove makes sense, right? Because it's a peacemaker. It doesn't want to hurt anybody. It's happiest when everybody gets along. Beavers have literally killed people. There was a man in Tennessee who was literally killed by a beaver. If you don't believe me, look it up. Okay, the guy was fishing and he saw this great big beaver and he wanted to get a picture of it. It bit him in the leg, severed an artery, and he bled to death. Okay, that is not a compliant animal. That's not an animal you want to jack around with. I have no idea who came up with it. There are 100 animals that are more compliant than a beaver is.
Well, actually, though it might work well because think about this: introverted and task-oriented. It just wants to do its thing, be left alone, and be about its task. And if you get in its way, it doesn't like people very much.
Right. All he wants to do is build his little home or the dam in the river.
Okay. So now I can kind of sort of get this. So in the seminary they sold compliant as like the peacemaker that just likes it when everybody kind of gets along and is kind of a rule follower and that sort of thing. But this sounds a little bit different. So that's interesting. Even among people who interpret the letters, there can be differences of understanding.
That's right.
It sounds like, or differences of emphasis. That's interesting.
Yeah. So Trish, first of all, let me share. So I'm a high I. I've got a little bit of dominant and steady, but every time I've taken this, no matter the DISC company or assessment tool, I always come out with high I, which is influencing, which is I'm people-oriented, I'm outgoing and extroverted. That's how I recharge. And for me, one of the things that has been affirming for me from other people, not just the assessment, is every time I get done preaching, almost every time I preach, people are like, wow, that was so inspiring. Which just fits me so well of who I am in how I preach. Trish, if you were to guess here, outgoing, extroverted, reserved, introverted.
So I would definitely put all my money on an S because I really do feel that aligns very closely with how I feel about myself. However, because I can turn that switch and because I have learned, and so this may be a learned part of my personality, that nature versus nurture thing, I might have some D sneaking in there because in the right environment, when like here, we're one-on-one, we're a small group, I can turn it on and I can be very extroverted and really enjoy being that outspoken person on topics that are important to me.
Yeah.
And so when you put me in a professional setting, I can be right there and I can be up on the stage. I can give a presentation, and I know it's crazy, but I don't get butterflies behind the microphone on a stage. Like a lot of people get really, nervous. That doesn't bother me. So that's where I think the D might sneak in there when I'm in the right environment.
Right. Well, and that's something I always talk about. And I would say this with DISC, but I always tell people with Myers-Briggs is there's a work self.
Yes.
And then there's your authentic self. And that's why I always say, don't take this at work. Take this at home. What we're trying to understand is how do you authentically operate, not how we've learned to operate. Because I think we've all learned how to work outside of our preferences or our personality domains. And so it's helping people understand how's God designed you actually and how you would operate if nobody were watching.
And at home, learn to embrace who you are.
Yes.
And being okay with the fact that, I think I just need a couple hours on the couch to myself.
Yeah.
And being okay with that and not feeling like society's pressure to say, oh, well, you have things to do. You should be out there talking to people and doing things when you need that time to recharge.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you hit an important point there, Trish. And one of the things that can sometimes be, I'm not going to say a detriment to these, but something that you want to be aware of is, you take a word like extrovert or you take a word like introvert, and there can always be kind of a misunderstanding around that. And I think in society today, we actually see that where people have this understanding that being extroverted is good because that means people like you, and it means that people are drawn to you, and it means that you're fun at social events and those sort of things. But if you're an introvert, that's bad because it means that you're antisocial. It means you don't like people. That is not true, like at all. That is absolutely not true. Being introverted does not necessarily mean that you don't like people. It doesn't mean you don't like being around people. It doesn't mean any of that. It has less to do with how you relate to others and more to do with just what captures your attention. Are you more focused on what's going on outside of your head in the outer world, or are you constantly thinking? Are you more turned inward? Is that where you spend most of your time? And you can be, and me personally, I mean, I can switch back and forth between the two pretty easily. But you can be introverted and still be very, very social. And I've known people like that.
That's why I like this one is because it shows that there's that one dichotomy is outgoing, extroverted, reserved, introverted, but then it's people-oriented or task-oriented. So it's showing in this one that being introverted doesn't mean that you're antisocial. I even had somebody who took the Myers-Briggs one time, came out as an I. He goes, well, I don't want to be antisocial. And it's like, it has nothing to do with it. Yeah. It's how do you recharge? That's the key.
Yeah.
So let's talk for a second. Where would the benefit of taking the DISC assessment, knowing how you operate in regards to your personality, whether it's DISC, whether it's we didn't get into Myers-Briggs or Enneagram, but even those assessments that really are kind of measuring personality. What's the benefit and how, and especially for you personally, and how you live out your calling?
I think especially with team building, this can be very, very valuable because look, none of these types on their own are good or bad.
Right. It's just who God made you to be.
Yeah, I think they can all be good in specific environments. But when you're assembling a team, I'm not sure that having all of the same type on there is a good idea. The analogy that they gave us in seminary, and I think this is right. I love this. But so if you've got a bunch of influencers on a team and that's all you have, okay, and they're planning like a youth event, what they're going to do is they're going to say, well, we should have a bounce house. No, we should have a bigger bounce house. No, we should put a diving board on the ceiling of the church and we should have kids diving off into the bounce house. Oh, no. We should have a helicopter and we should bungee jump at, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Talk. You need the person who's steady in the room to say, okay, now have we checked to see if this is even legal?
Right.
Maybe I should go check with, you need that person who's kind of the analogy, the wet blanket, so to speak, who comes in and says, okay, this is a great idea, but is this ethical? Is this legal? Is this safe? et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Or maybe you do a youth event, some mystery, and you give every kid a candle without any candle holders, and then you get a call the next morning, Travis, wait, we got candle wax all over the sanctuary.
Yes.
And then you're on your knees for the next 3 months, cleaning up wax. That never happened to me.
You don't know anything about that.
I heard about something at King of Glory. There was a pancake dinner where pancake batter got spilled into the oven or something like that, and the fire department may or may not got involved.
That was a fun night.
Yes. So, so you don't want all, and likewise, I mean, if you have a team of nothing but D's, nothing will get done because they'll kill each other. I'm serious. They will kill each other. Okay. If you have a bunch, so you need a good mix in there. You need a diverse mix.
Yeah.
And certain types don't work well together.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean either one is good or bad. It just means they don't work well together. Yeah. And so
if there's some conflict, you're understanding the nature of why that is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's telling that when Jesus sent the 12 disciples out, they didn't all stay in one place. I mean, some of them did, but it was pretty quickly they dispersed, and they went and they kind of did their own thing in different areas and in different missions and things like that. And it's because I think, it has to do with the gifts that each one of them had. And of course, we don't know much about that, but it also has to do with just the personalities, I think. Different personalities are going to flourish in different environments. And so, we have to have the freedom to do that, I think.
Yeah. Well, I like that, too, because you don't stick a penguin in the jungles of Brazil, and you don't take an elephant and stick it in the Antarctic. I mean, there's going to be a place that you're going to really thrive, the right environment. This can help you kind of understand that. Trish, how about for you? Where do you see some benefit here with this kind of work?
So Kevin's already admitted that he's on the people side, and so am I. So I guess my thoughts follow that same thought. Is beyond the team building, it gives people an opportunity to, again, here comes that introverted thing again, to look within themselves and say, okay, how do I respond and get a better understanding about myself, and then where I fit in with that team. Yeah. What skills and abilities do I bring that I can then use? And so it really for me, it brings in the team. How do you build a team that has the right pieces and parts that can accomplish things together? But then also, where do I fit? And what can I contribute in a positive way? And then also, I guess we can flip that narrative and say, and what maybe do I not want to bring to the table? Because I do have some negative things in my personality. We all do that we want to keep in check. And so, getting overwhelmed and the list is too long, where do I start? And so sometimes you need someone else who can pick up that ball for you.
That's right. Yeah.
And knowing who's on the team to maybe, grab those things that are your weaknesses. We're not going to say negative. We're going to say weaknesses.
Yep.
And then that way you can play on your strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. You can be the best of who God's made you to be, and somebody who's complementary. I think that's the thing. It's not differences. It's being complementary to each other. And we need everybody. You got some people who are people-oriented. You need community and getting along. But you also got to get stuff done. Some people are extroverted. So when you get to the end of the day, they're going to want to go do something or get together to recharge, where it's okay for the introvert to say, hey, I need some downtime. Yep. And you give them that permission. Or, I'm an extrovert in my thinking, so I think my thoughts out. Trish, you might need some time to think things through before you share something. And usually the introverts, when they share something, it's really good because they've had time to think about it, versus me, I'm just blabbering,
Spontaneous conversation is really not my strength. Give me about, 6 hours, and then I've got a really good comeback for you.
Very good. Hey, so as we wrap up, what should be a takeaway from our podcast conversation for our listening and viewing audience today?
Well, I think about the psalmist. You're uniquely, beautifully, and wonderfully made. And I especially like uniquely made. There's even within, you can try to put people into a box, you can try to cookie cut people, but even within personality types, there can be wide differences in the ways that people interact. So it's a helpful tool, but it's not all of who you are. And we're going to be diving into even more of that as we continue through this season of the Called2B podcast. But just remember that you are uniquely called, and that's all of you. Your personality, your quirks, really everything about you. It's uniquely called for a specific purpose.
Yeah. I always kind of equate these assessment tools because they're so different and they measure for different things, is we're all like diamonds, and each of these show a different facet of the complete person who God has created and redeemed us to be. Trish, what should be a takeaway from your perspective?
So I think that if we kind of break it down a little bit, we all have varying ingredients that make us who we are. And I don't think it's by mistake which ones God gave us.
Yeah.
And I think we need to look at those ingredients and how we're going to add to that recipe that helps us build the meal or whatever it is that we're building out. And I think that knowing and understanding a little bit about those ingredients and our personality helps us then to be able to use them in a productive way and to lead towards what we're meant to do in this life. And sometimes we don't find out what we're meant to do right away.
Yeah.
It may happen when you're young and it may happen when you're older. And that's okay. But it's that time in between where we learn how to use those things as strengths.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. All these are really just to appreciate the uniqueness. I love the idea of what you just talked about, the ingredients that God has put in to make you, you. Mm-hmm. And, you can do this by trial or error, which happens. I mean, a lot of people figure out how God's wired them that way. This is a way that perhaps if you're not sure, you can fast track some things a little bit. Again, it's not completely to define you or put you in a box, but it helps create some awareness and then start thinking about, hey, what's it look like? What's the right environment for me? What's it look like for me to work with people who are similar and different from me? So that we can be complementary to achieve more together than we can by ourselves. So, well, thank you both for being here and kicking off this season with a great conversation. We want to thank our viewing and listening audience. Thank you for joining us for season 3 of the Called2B podcast. Maybe you have been inspired by this and you're sitting there kind of wondering, who has God created and redeemed me to be? And maybe you're seeking some greater awareness so that you can have a greater kingdom impact. If you're interested, we'd like to invite you. Please reach out to us at called2bpodcast@gmail.com. If you might be interested in taking the DISC assessment or perhaps the Myers-Briggs, just to understand how God's wired you a little bit more in regard to your personality, be happy to facilitate that with you, maybe do some coaching on that and thinking of what it looks like to apply to your different callings of life. We also want to just give a call to action. If you have been blessed by this, not just listen and like this podcast, but make sure to share it with somebody who might benefit as well. As always, we want to thank Malem in the Southeastern District for the generous gifts that made this podcast possible. And with that, we want to wish you all God's richest blessings, and we'll catch you next time for the Called2B podcast. Take care, everybody.